Hi there, and welcome to my 2026 Tour de Fleece Journey. My name is Carol. I'm known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry, and I host a mostly knitting podcast called A Stitch in Time here on YouTube. In fact, I recorded a regular episode earlier today. I've all done with the editing and uploading. I've had dinner, and it's now almost 8:15 on the evening of the first day of Tour de Fleece, July 4th, and I am itching to get started. I am literally flying by the seat of my pants. I only decided maybe an hour ago that I was going to chronicle my progress during Tour de Fleece this year, and I am not exactly sure what form that's going to take, whether it be a daily vlog. I think that's unlikely. Maybe a series of weekly vlogs, or perhaps something all in one episode at the end of the month. Just had a call from my daughter-in-law who is going to come over for some knitting help. So I am just going to give a brief introduction to what I plan to spin for Tour de Fleece this year, and then I'll get into things in more detail later. I am still hoping that I can spin just a little bit tonight before I go to bed. We'll see. I have recently strained my arm and shoulder through some overuse knitting this top, and so a lot of how far I can get going, or what I can get done this year, is largely going to depend on how this injury heals. So it's feeling really good today. I am hopeful that I will be able to spin everything I want to during the next few weeks. I am not good at holding back when I get excited about something, so I hope I will be disciplined enough and not to put myself in a worse position than I've already been in during the last few weeks. So I learned to spin a couple of years ago, and I fell in love with it. I knew I would. In fact, I put off learning how to spin for a long time, telling myself I just didn't need another hobby or another type of stash. But I'm really happy that I took it up, and I enjoy learning all sorts of new things, whether it be how to spin different fibers or learning some different techniques. I recently acquired this book called Yarn a Texture by Julia Moreno. And when I saw this sweater in it, called the Tetris Pullover, I knew I wanted to make it. Here's a look at the back of it. So I had recently acquired some Blue-Faced Leicester BFL and Tussa Silk blend from Bramble Ridge, which is a fairly local to me dyer in the greater Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada area. And I loved how it spun up. I took two colorways and spun them separately, applied them together, and knit up the Traveler Cowl by Andrea Mallory. And it was during this experience of spinning that I knew exactly what yarn I wanted to use for the Tetris Pullover. So I went on the Bramble Ridge website, and I found this colorway of the same fiber called Oil Slick 2. There were two iterations of the same colorway, and I think they're going to be absolutely gorgeous. So my plan is to spin up a 2-ply of this fabric to then later knit the Tetris Pullover. That sweater is by Julia Farwell Clay. Now, the notes from the book, when talking about how the yarn was spun, Beth Smith, the spinner, noted, "For this yarn, I focused on what Julia wanted to happen with the colors, which was to have them as mixed up as possible. I spun a few yards from the full thickness of the top, short forward draw, but with a light pinch, and center photos. We talked about color repeats and how long she wanted each color bit to be. We decided that I should strip the top in half so that the color lengths would be shorter and change more often. When plying, there was some color matching, but the overlapping of different colors was desirable for this particular sweater. So I had originally thought that I would do a fractal spin, similar to what I had done for this yarn, and you can see those repeats of color in the cowl. But having refreshed my recollection and by reading these notes this evening, I've decided that what I'm going to do is take each braid, split it in half vertically, and then spin each length and then ply the two together. And my first step is going to be taking the braids out, taking a good look at how similar or how different they are, and then my intention is to kind of mix them up as much as possible so that there is a fairly consistent color blend throughout the sweater. I am going to spin this yarn on my electric eel wheel 6 from Dreaming Robots. And if I have time and if my arm lets me, I am also going to spin this yarn, also from Bramble Ridge, on my traditional spinning wheel. I have an Ashford Traveler from I think the 1970s or so. And this is a South Down sock blend. 75% South Down baby doll, 12.5% alpaca, 12.5% bio nylon in the Tide Pool colorway. And my plan for this is to do a 3-ply 2 ways sock yarn. So I'm going to strip this braid in half lengthwise. I'm going to spin one half end to end and chain ply it, and then I'm going to divide the second half further into 3 lengths, spin them separately and ply the 3 together. And then when I knit the socks, I will alternate stripes of the chain plied yarn and the 3-ply yarn to get an interesting striped effect. So wish me luck. We'll see how I get on. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and once I've finished helping my daughter-in-law, I am hoping to take my comb tops apart, my braids apart. By the way, this is, it just says BFL Tussa Silk. It doesn't actually say the percentages. But yeah, I'm going to take these apart, get a good look at them, and like I said, hopefully get a chance to begin spinning this evening. I'll keep you posted. It's now about 2 hours later, coming up on 10:30. My daughter-in-law has come and gone, knitting mistake fixed, easy peasy, and then we had a good visit afterwards. So I've resigned myself to the fact that I am not going to start spinning tonight. But what I thought I could do is start dividing up my fiber. So I've taken all 4 of my braids and just split the labels. And I'm just going to start taking these apart, just like this. I've already done the first one. And what I'm going to do is take each braid, split it into this way, as evenly as I can with each braid. Then I'm going to lay them all out here on the couch in my spare room. And tomorrow when the light is better, I'm going to match up which halves I'm going to ply with each other. I'm going to try and achieve as good a distribution of color as possible. So I will not be plying half of braid 1 with the other half of braid 1. I might do something like half of braid 1 with half of braid 2, the other half of braid 2 with half of braid 3, and so on, so that the colors are mixed well throughout. I'll see how that works in the morning. And then I thought after I do that, if I still feel like it tonight, I will take this braid apart, also split it lengthwise in 2, and then I'll go ahead and split the second half in 3 again. So it will be all prepped for spinning when I decide to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. It's so much fun to, I love when they come apart this easily. Just very satisfying. And the colors in here are just so pretty. I think with any project, knitting, spinning, it's the planning and the beginning that I really love. Just to see how things, you know, are in your mind. They often, unfortunately, don't come out as you necessarily plan, but I think the anticipation is a big part of why we all like to start new projects and don't always want to finish the ones we're working on. So I'm happy these are coming apart really easily. Oh, see, sometimes you just capture a part of it. Like, look at those colors together. Isn't that gorgeous? So anyway, I'm gonna leave you here. I'll check in probably again tomorrow once I start matching up the halves of these braids. So see you then. I hadn't planned to come back and talk with you again this evening, but here I am. I have divided up all of the BFL Tussa silk for my sweater. As I described, divided each of the 4 braids into 2 lengthwise sections and laid them out, and I will deal with them further in the morning. But I thought I could sit and chat while I divvy up the tie-pool silk-down sock for my sock yarn. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and pull the braid apart. Oh, look how pretty. This is going to work great, I think, for the 3-ply 2-way because it does have very good long sections of color. So, just curious how it's dyed. What I realized with the other colorway is it's basically repeats itself end to end. So if you took the 2 ends together, folded them, the colors basically line up where I can see that that is not the case with this braid. They do overlap in some places, but in others they don't. So now what I'm going to do is do my best to divide this evenly lengthwise. And I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and weigh this prior to doing that so that I know what I'm aiming for. I have a bowl here I can put on my scale and reset it. And just pile right in front of you all the fiber into the bowl. So I have 108.9 grams of fiber. So I'm aiming for about 54 to 55 grams in each of my halves. So let's see how I do. So there's the end. So I'm just gonna quickly weigh those and see how close I am. Okay, that half is 53.3. That means this one's just slightly bigger. That's not bad at all. $55.4. I am not going to muck around with that for 2 grams. It's not worth it. So if I think about it, I think I will keep the larger one set aside for doing the chain ply. So that means that I need to take this and divide it in 3. So what did I say it was? Okay, 53.2 divided by 3. I'm aiming for, it's 17.733333 repeating. So I'm aiming for approximately 17.5 to 18 grams per section. So this part always seems a little bit trickier, trying to divide something like this in 3. Yeah, it needs to be more like that, I think. Like I said, this is always the tricky part. Trying to split something in 3. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this section first. I have a feeling I'm gonna have to be doing a little bit of adjusting here, but we'll start with this. See how it goes. It's all twisted here. I remember watching spinners when I was a non-spinner and just thinking, aren't you afraid of ripping the fiber apart? And you realize once you start spinning that it's okay. There's nothing to fear. Okay, so there I am at the end of the braid. This seems a little bit thinner at this end. Let's see what I have. Well, that's 18. Not bad. Not bad at all. And so I just basically have to divide this one in half, and there seems to be a fairly, fairly logical spot, but that feels a bit too thick on this side. You can see it actually looks like it could go here. So that's what I'm going to do. I think this is actually dividing it from the opposite end as I did the first one. We'll see if that turns out to be a mistake or not. Yeah, I feel like I'm getting this side too thick and that thin. I'm going to go to the opposite end where I started the first time and see if I can manage that a little bit better. And I can see I'm coming up to the point where I started to split it from the other end. So we'll see how that works out. Not so bad. Okay. Well, let's see how we did. 18.6, so that's going to be a little bit heavier, and this one should end up just slightly lighter. Uh, 16.3. So it's definitely a little bit lighter than the other two. So I have 2 choices. One is to try and take just a little bit more off of this one separate that out onto here, or I could just spin the 3 as they are and have a little bit of these 2 left over in the end. I'm gonna sleep on that decision. Good morning, welcome to day 2 of Tour de Fleece. It's about, I don't know, 11:30 or so, just about 11:30. I've been sitting here fiddling around with my sock spin, and I have succeeded in dividing the yarn for the traditional 3-ply into 3 equal bundles. They each weigh 17.5 grams. Took a little bit of manipulation, and full disclosure, I ended up with this little strip left over, but I'm just going to add that into the length for the chain ply. I'm not so precise a spinner that I expect to have exactly the same length on each of my 3 bobbins for my traditional 3-ply, but I wanted to make them as close as I could. So what I'm doing in order to encourage some barber pulling is, if you look at the ends, you will see that this was not dyed in the same way as the yarn for my sweater spin. If you fold it in half, these colors do not line up in the same way. So what I am going to do is I'm winding 2 of the balls from the same end of the length of comb top, and then I am going to wind the other one in the opposite direction, so that I will have, in theory, 2 strands the same color and 1 a different color. Now again, because these are not, exactly the same throughout the width, and because my spinning is not precise, I am not going to end up with color matches the whole way through the skein. I know that, but it just makes the probability of having some barber pulling higher. So here I have my 3 balls ready to go for my traditional 3-ply, and they are all, 2 of them are wound from one direction, 1 from the other, and then I'm just gonna wind that up a little bit better too, and get this ready to spin. Look how pretty that looks. So this little basket will live next to my spinning wheel here for the next several weeks, or however long it takes me to spin it up. I think I'm going to start with the traditional 3-ply and get a real feel for the fiber before tackling the fiber for the chain ply. All right, I think it's time to go revisit the fiber for my sweater spin and decide what I'm going to do with that. Here you can see all 4 braids for my sweater spin unwound and divided in half lengthwise. I've been taking a really good look to see how similar or different each braid is from the other, and I have to say they are very consistent. It's obvious that they were dyed at the same time, probably all laid out in a row and dye applied across the board. There are some subtle differences. For instance, you can see that the brown sections at the end of this braid differ from the ones on this one, but even this is 2 ends of the same braid and they're not the same. So it's just a minor inconsistency, nothing to worry about. You're never going to get them identical, and that's just not humanly possible. So what I've been thinking about is I probably honestly could take each braid, spin them separately, and use them in the same project. I think they're that similar. But because I can easily do this, I think what I want to do is mix the braids up so that there's some of each braid in each skein. So my plan is to spin 4 2-ply skeins. So what I'm thinking of doing, because these braids are symmetrical, you can see if you fold it in half, follow it down, they're the same length to length. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and divide each length here in the center. And then I'm going to take 1 piece from each of the 4 different braids, put 2 together for one ply, put 2 together for the other ply. And that way, when I spin everything up, each skein will contain 1/4 of each braid. And that way the colors will be evenly distributed across the finished yarn. So I know that's probably pickier than some people would be, but that's just in my personality. So I'm going to go ahead now and start breaking those lengths in 2 and then matching them up and getting them laid out ready to spin. We have all of the little balls waiting to be spun. So I will spin this and ply it with this, this plied with this, plied with this, this plied with this. If you noticed, I tried to mix up the order in which I took them. Then I got kind of mixed up myself, but in any case, some of them are going to be like braid 1 and 2 with braid 3 and 4. Some are going to be braid 1 and 3 with braids 2 and 4. Braids 1 and 4, 2 and 3, and then one more, I think it was 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But yay, I am ready to spin. So excited. There you go. There's a good look at the beautiful yarn, or I should say yarn to be. I thought I was all set to go, but then it occurred to me that these little bundles that are going to be plied together should be as close in weight to each other as possible. So I did take these out and weigh them, and I did a little bit of rearranging, but only from one bundle to the other. So each skein will still have one length from each braid. It's just in some cases maybe 1 and 2 are being spun together here and here. I don't know, I've totally lost count and lost track of what went where, which is good because that makes it truly random. But in some cases we're going to have 1 and 2 being spun together, 3 and 4 and then plied. Totally fine. The idea though is that each braid is represented in each skein of yarn, and that will be the case. So now it's time to get started spinning. If you can believe it, it's almost 3:30 and I still haven't started spinning. Just one thing after another has gotten in the way. But I'm just sitting here now and I'm just prepping my fiber. So this is what it looks like. And I am just kind of, it's hard to do without looking, just kind of spacing it out, fluffing it out. Maybe there's a word for this. Teasing it out. I think there's a word I'm missing. Pre-drafting is basically what I'm doing. So first I'm just going to loosen up the fibers. It's got a little bit more to go. So what I'm doing is just got both pieces out of one bundle for my first bobbin. And just fluffing this out, and then I'm going to, I think it's called attenuating your fiber, and I tend to do that most of the time. I don't usually just, I have in the past just spun it right off the braid like this, but I feel like I have a better luck when I prep it a little more. So there's the end. So I'm just going to take it and just gently pull it apart. Just gently. So it's not going to come, well, sometimes by accident it does come right apart, but it's just to loosen those fibers, kind of have them all going in the right direction. I mean, comb top, the fibers are lined up, just like combing your hair. But I'm just gonna loosen these. Whoops, see, that one just about came apart. Usually I have my hands down in closer to me here. Not usually doing it for the camera, obviously. Okay, so that's the first half. So I'm just going to start at the end and then just very loosely roll it up into a ball. And then I'll spin off that. So that's the second half of the first bundle. And I have the first half ready to go. Oops. Now, I have to say, I'm kind of nervous about starting to spin. I think because I've so much invested in this project, not just expense, but I want it to work so badly. And so I've been giving it a lot of thought, as you can tell, as to how to divide up the fiber, etc. But now it's the moment of truth, and I am hoping that I can maintain a fairly consistent spin. I want it to be very similar to the spin that I did for my traveler cowl. It was just, for me, the right weight, the right amount of twist, the right amount of loft. And so I am really hopeful that I can maintain that. So because I'm a little nervous, I'm not going to film myself starting to spin. I'm going to take the pressure off there. I don't need to feel like anyone's watching me, or if I'm making some mistakes or having some trouble, I'm going to hide all that for now. So I am just going to turn off the camera and I am going to start to spin at last and see how it goes. All right, now that I have done a little bit of fiddling around, I'm willing to let you watch me spin. I'm always self-conscious about it because I don't know if I'm doing things wrong. On the other hand, if I'm getting usable yarn out of it, I guess I'm doing things right. So what I am trying to achieve is a yarn that's 2 plies and is 13 to 14 wraps per inch. And the yarn that was spun for this sweater was done using a short forward draw, which I think is what I do naturally anyway. So I have never really used a gauge like this before, a wraps per inch tool, to use as a control for my spinning. But because I really want this sweater to work out, I'm actually doing that this time. So through a little bit of trial and error, I have set my motor speed to just below 2. And what I'm trying to achieve is, I don't know if you can see that, if I can get my singles to fit here where it's a little groove for fingering weight. And then if I can double those up, let me bring the camera closer. Maybe I can bring the yarn closer to you. So here's the yarn twisted upon itself, and it fits nicely in this sport groove here. So that's what I'm trying to achieve. So I plan to periodically just stop and check my yarn every so often and make sure that I am still spinning it fairly consistently. I started out with a lower speed, but I was finding my spinning was less even and felt like it was taking too long. And this just feels a little more right. So you can see it does have quite a bit of a twist in the yarn, but I do like the way it looks when it twists back on itself, as I showed you. And so I think I'm on the right track. So I am just going to spin for a while and see what I can get done here. A little bit of vegetable matter in my, vegetable matter in my fiber. So I will get rid of that. I got a little waste paper basket right next to me here. And you can see a very fancy setup. This is an IKEA plant stand. And I have a desk here, and so I can sit here in my comfy chair at my desk. I can put my iPad here, watch podcasts, or listen to audiobooks, or watch other YouTube things. So I am very comfortable here. It's a good setup for me. Works. And yeah, it's just got the fan on. It's a hotter day today than yesterday, and keeping cool and just loving feeling the feel of wool in my hands again and spinning. I just find it so pleasant, so relaxing. And I love to watch the bobbin fill up with all the different colors. Hello again. It is now day 3 of Tour de Fleece. It's a little after 3 on Monday afternoon. I've been doing laundry all day, but I had a chance to come in to my craft room here about half an hour ago and sit down and do some spinning. And in fact, that's all I have left to do for my first bobbin. So as you can tell, I did get a chance yesterday, once I got going, to do a fair bit of spinning, but I was very careful to not spin for too long at a time and to do some other things in between spinning sessions. And my arm is feeling great, so hopefully that will last. I was looking through the projects on Ravelry for the Tetris Pullover, and it seems like most people used about a sport weight yarn, which makes sense based on the wraps per inch that are described in the pattern requirements. And I've been pretty pleased with my ability to maintain a fairly consistent fingering weight single, which when plied with another should yield about a sport weight yarn. I know from previous experience spinning this yarn that it does bloom a fair bit when you ply it, and I think that will also serve me well. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is there does seem to be a fair bit of twist in my singles, but then I often find that sort of releases itself during plying. But just to be sure, I am going to spin the first bobbin of each skein first, and then I'll go back and spin the second bobbins, and that should allow plenty of time for my singles to rest for each of the skeins. I've also been toying with the idea of maybe doing a fractal spin, in which case I would go back and I would further divide the fiber I have set aside for the second skeins in half again lengthwise, and that would increase the color changes. But what I'm trying to achieve is not too long a stretch of certain colors. At the same time, I don't want the color changes to be so short that you miss the effect of the striping and color play on the sweater. But I have lots of time to think about that. I have as much time as it takes me to spin 3 more bobbins worth of fibers, so I will obviously fill you in on that once I decide. So I am just literally at my last few inches of fiber here, and then once I finish my first bobbin, I will come back and show you how it looks. I am recording this with one hand holding my phone and the other hand holding everything else on my lap, as you can see, and so we'll see how it goes. So here's bobbin 1 of my singles for my first skein, and don't the colors look beautiful? This fiber blend has such a gorgeous sheen to it. So I've just unwound a little bit of fiber, and you can see it fits really well into that first groove that indicates fingering and super fine. And so I don't think I'll have any trouble achieving the sport to DK weight that I'm looking for. I was a little bit worried about being over twisted, but since I unwound some of that fiber, you can see that it's actually not too bad at all. In fact, it's coming a little bit untwisted with some handling. So I think I'll be okay as far as twist goes. What I did is I went ahead and I labeled each of the label, or I should say I numbered each of the labels that came with the 4 braids of fiber. I guess I could have just as easily put the numbers on the front, and I may do that. But I'm just going to use that label to wrap it around the first bobbin for each skein, and then I'm going to bring that down here and store them in my basket so that I will know which bundle of fiber is meant for each of the, to match up with each of the first bobbins of each skein. I also have 3 different colors of bobbins. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is do either blue or purple for skein 2, and then the other for skein 3, and then I'll go back to white for skein 4. And that'll help keep things also separated and identifiable. So I think what I'm gonna do is go fold my last load of laundry, come up, set up the wheel for the first bobbin of skein 2. And then I think I'm going to take a little break from spinning for a while. It is July 14th, it's Tuesday afternoon, day 12 of Tour de Fleece, and I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at. I've now spun just over half of my sweater spin. I was away for a few days up at our family cabin, and I took what was left of the first half of the fleece with me and managed to spin it all. And so I have the first 4 bobbins all spun and labeled. I think the light is a little bit filtered, if that's the right word, so you're probably not getting as true and bright a color, but that gives you an idea. So there's bobbin 2 and 3. And 4. Hooray! So I am not being as diligent about checking the thickness of my singles with my tool, but every time it looks like it's getting a little bit thick, I do my best to kind of thin things out. I know it's not going to be perfect. I never thought it would be perfect, but hopefully it's relatively consistent across the 4 braids. So a couple of things. One is what I've been doing in order to mix up the colors as much as I can. This is the second half of the bobbin that's going to match bobbin 1. So you can see here that on one side the green is a different shade than the other. So when I am spinning my fiber, I am doing my best to kind of spin all of the one shade together and then move to the next shade. There are blue sections that are also, this is not, well, there you can see that's a little bit lighter there and darker there. And I am not paying attention to the order in which I do this. So in some cases, the dark green gets spun first, in some cases the light green does, but I'm trying to mix up the colors as much as I can to have shorter sections of each color. So another thing, I talked about maybe dividing the second half of each skein into half again to do a fractal spin. But then when I was reading over the comments in the book for the sweater, it mentioned that it stripped it down into 2. And that's basically what I'm working with here. And so I decided I am not going to strip it down any further. I am just spinning it as is. So this has been prepped. The first half of the second half of skein 1 is currently on my e-spinner. I'd say I'm maybe, I don't even know if I'm a quarter of the way through, but I've kind of got most of my jobs done today. My last load of laundry's in, and I've got some time this afternoon to spin. So that's what I'm going to do. It is just afternoon on Saturday, July 18th. So we are now a full 2 weeks into Tour de Fleece, and I'm feeling really good about my progress. We had our granddaughter's sleepover for a couple of nights, and then we had our grandson here with us most of the day yesterday. So I haven't had as much spinning time over the last few days as I would have liked. On the other hand, I did end up with more than I expected. Now that the grandkids are older, they can entertain themselves a lot of the time. So I'm very excited to say that I am now on my last bobbin for my sweater spin. I have my basket of happiness here in my lap. You can see those 7 bobbins are all full. And I just have this one last bundle to spin, plus about 2 feet, which is left to spin, which is already on the wheel. So this is the equivalent of half a bobbin or a quarter of a braid. So my first bundle is already almost spun up. Like I say, just about 2 feet left to go, and then I'll add this in, and then I'll be done. So I don't know if I had discussed the order in which I planned to spin the second bobbin for each skein. I had thought I would start at the second bobbin for skein 1, then go skein 2, skein 3, end with skein 4. And that is what I'm doing. But I did look into it because I had heard at some time that you're supposed to, on a sweater spin or a big spin your first bobbin with your last bobbin, your second bobbin with your second last bobbin, and so on. And I had considered doing that. That would have meant spinning the second bobbin of skein 4 first, working my way up to 3, 2, and 1. But like I say, I did start with 1 first, or the second half of skein 1 first. So there's a really good look at the singles and the colors. So I've been debating when to start plying these together. I'm so excited to see the colors together. In fact, I was thinking about it last night when I was lying in bed. Do you guys do that? Anyway, this one is my very first bobbin, so it's been sitting for almost 2 weeks. And this one has been sitting for a few days. So I think what I'm going to do is once I finish spinning up this bobbin, maybe starting tomorrow, I'll start plying up each skein, maybe 1 skein each day over the course of 4 days, and that will give today's bobbin like 4 days to rest. And then in the meantime, I will start my sock spin on my Ashford Traveler. So I will keep you posted as I make progress. Good Sunday morning. It is July 19th, which means it's day 15 of Tour de Fleece. And I did it. Last night I finished spinning my last bobbin of singles, so I am ready to start plying. Here are my first 2 bobbins that I'm going to ply together, and I think you're getting a really good look at the colors here. I cannot wait to see what they look like all plied together. I got my wheel set up last night. I remembered to turn it from Z twist to S twist so we won't have any overplying disasters. So I'm just going to go have a quick bite to eat for breakfast, and then I'm going to start plying. Check in with you later. All right, breakfast is over and I'm ready to go. You can see here the 2 bobbins all set up, ready to ply on my Dreaming Robots Lazy Kate. It actually comes with 3 bases that go together like that with a magnet. And you'll see there are some tension bands here. They're just elastic that wrap around the bottom of the bobbin just to give it a little bit of tension. And then it also has these little rubber rings that sit down to keep your bobbins from flying off. So I've got those there beside me, and then just over here is my e-spinner. I think I might have said earlier in the video that it's an electric eel wheel 6, but it's actually 6.1. Anyway, I'm gonna try and set up my camera so you can see some plying going on, but no promises. There we have it, my first bobbin all plied. My sun seems to have disappeared. I'm going to show it to you there, and I'm going to go turn my light on and see if that helps. Okay, there you go. I don't know if that is better or worse or about the same. The sun keeps going in and out of the clouds. I can see it, feel it disappearing again. But hopefully you can get a good look at all the colors there. There's lots of barber poling that's showing, but I was happy to see as I was spinning that there are lots of places where the same colors were plying on themselves. So there should be a good range of color differences as I knit up the sweater. It seemed also as I was spinning that the plies were pretty consistent. from bobbin to bobbin. Now, of course, there are areas like here. You can see that middle area is definitely thinner than the spots on either side of it, which is normal. I'm a human, not a machine, so perfection was never the expectation or the goal, frankly. If I wanted perfect yarn, I could just buy it. I think I'm pretty close to attaining my goal of having about a sport weight yarn. It will probably plump up a little bit with washing, and even if it gets closer to a DK, that should be fine because the gauge for this sweater is 20 stitches over 4 inches, which is a worsted weight gauge. So I don't think I'm going to have any trouble attaining an acceptable and good usable gauge for this sweater. Another thing I'm really happy with is just how well matched the bobbins were. That's all I have left on the second bobbin. So I will ply that up with the leftovers from the second skein, and hopefully I won't end up with too much in the way of unused singles. So next step, I'm going to put this on to my Swift. I'm going to run it through my yarn counter as I do that to get a sense of how much yardage I have pre-soaking. I'm going to give it a bath, hang it up to dry, and hopefully it'll be dry soon so I can start swatching with it. So here's my setup. I have my bobbin on my e-wheel, which is leading into my yarn counter, also from Dreaming Robots. I have it set for 15 wraps per inch because that's what I measured on my handy dandy wraps per inch tool, and then we'll come over to my Swift. So I'm going to wind the yarn onto there. There you can see the yarn counter measures 255.9 yards. The size I want to make takes 970, so even if this shrinks up a bit, I should be good to go. And here's a look at some of the colors while it is still on the Swift. Oh, so beautiful, and it just has such a nice sheen to it. So as you can see, I've tied it up, and I'm going to take it off and wash it. Oh, so happy. So here's a look at the yarn off of the Swift. Feels a little bit ropey, but I'm really pleased at how straight it's hanging considering how overspun some of the singles were as I was plying it. So I've run a little bath with some eucalyptus. I put a color catcher in there, and so I'm gonna leave that and let it soak for a while. Here's the finished yarn hanging up outside in the sunshine and the breeze. With the sun on it, you really see those oil slick inspired colors. I've got the yarn for bobbin number 2 all set up, ready to ply tomorrow. My spinning wheel is all ready to go. I've got a few minutes to kill, so I thought what I would do is play with this fiber. This is the fiber that I divided up for my sock spin. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and do a little bit of fluffing of the fiber so it's ready to spin when I am. Happy Monday. It is July 20th, so I guess that makes it day 16 of Tour de Fleece. It is late afternoon on what has admittedly been a really low energy day for me. I'm not quite sure what's going on. I usually have a lot of get up and go, but I've been dragging my feet all day today. Having said that, I did sit down this morning and ply the second skein of yarn for my sweater spin, and it is currently outside drying in the semi-sunshine. It's been kind of a strange day today. It's very hot, but we have a bit of cloud cover accompanied by a haze of wildfire smoke. I'm not quite sure where it's coming from. I know there are fires south of the border, and we have several burning in the interior of British Columbia. So whether it's funneling down the valleys from there or coming northwards from the United States, not sure. I just know that you can smell it in the air, and it definitely is messing with the lighting today. So I'm not quite sure exactly how the lighting will be when I show you skein 1 of my sweater spin. I have reskeined this and remeasured it. I lost about 8 or 9 yards, so that's not too bad. And I'm pretty happy with it. It's quite balanced. I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch. There's some wavy, twisty bits, but it definitely has softened up as I expected it would with washing. And yeah, I'm just generally happy with it. When I was plying the yarn this morning, it felt like the plies and the overall yarn was a little bit finer than the skein. And sure enough, when I did the initial measure, I definitely had more yardage on that skein than I did on this one, even though they are about the same weight. So it'll be interesting to see how skeins 3 and 4 work out. I'm not too worried. It's hand spun, and I'm sure I can make it work. So there's another look at the finished skein. So excited to have reached this point. I am so tempted to wind this up and start swatching for my sweater, but I am resisting for a couple of reasons. One is I really want a picture of all 4 skeins together. And I also want to be able to look at all 4 skeins at the beginning of the project, see how they are the same or different, and I think that will assist me in choosing which skeins to knit with in what order. So I am resisting. Instead, I'm going to start spinning my sock yarn. So between last night and this morning, I fluffed and attenuated all of my yarn, so I'm ready to go. I'm a little bit nervous. I have not spun on my traditional wheel, in quite a long time. I'm hoping that it'll be like riding a bike. I mean, in theory, it should be, right? But yeah, I am anxious to sit down at that and use it some more. I just have to be disciplined because it does tend to aggravate some pain in my right foot and leg if I'm spinning too much. As for my arm, it's doing great. I had a couple of days when we were up at our cabin that it was bothering me, and part of that I think was from knitting in the car on the way up and the way I had to sit, and then the bed up there is a double where we have a queen here at home, and I don't have as much room to like spread out when I sleep, which tended to make my arm be in like an awkward position for longer periods of time. But since we got home and I've been spinning, it hasn't been bothering me at all. So knock wood that continues. So I'm gonna go, I'll see if I can get my phone camera set up and document me doing a little bit of spinning on my Ashford Traveler. I'm certainly excited to see how this very, very colorful yarn spins up. Oh, better go. So as you can see, I have been doing a little bit of spinning on my wheel. There's a little bit of fiber on the bobbin there. I've been struggling a little bit, partly getting back in the swing of things, partly because there's a little bit of a pull to my take-up. It's a little bit jerky. And I Googled it. I've been trying all sorts of things like cleaning different parts, oiling parts, tightening this, loosening this, and it's still a little bit like that. So I may have to take a deeper dive, maybe take things apart, maybe have to tighten some screws. I don't really know. My wheel's been sitting idle for quite a while, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's like dust and dirt in some grooves and maybe some parts that need more oil than I've given them. It's definitely less pronounced than when I first sat down, so that's an improvement, but it's still not that same smooth pull that I'm used to both on my electric wheel and what I remember from using my regular traditional wheel here. So I'm going to persevere a little bit longer on this, see if it smooths itself out as the oil works its way into the parts. Other than that, I might need to break my fiber, take things apart, and do a more thorough cleaning and maintenance on my wheel. So I'll check back with you later. It is just about 12:30 on Thursday, July 23rd, which is day 19 of Tour de Fleece. And I am happy to report that at about this time yesterday, I achieved my goal of spinning yarn for the Tetris Pullover by Julia Farwell Clay. And I have my book here so I can remind you of what that sweater looks like. It is a modular construction, and so you start with this section right here. In front of me, I have my 4 skeins of yarn. Just to remind you, I had 4 braids of fiber, which I split in half vertically, and then I split again in half horizontally. So each of these skeins is made up of 1 section of each braid of fiber in order to maintain consistency across the spin. Even having done that, it's interesting how they've turned out a little bit differently, especially the 3rd skein. Just because of the way the colors were laid out in the quantities, there was more barber pulling and less overlap, color overlap on the skein than the other 3. So it's just interesting to see how that worked out. I also think this one is a little bit more loosely plied. So I'm going to use this skein for the back where it will be the least noticeable. And I will go through and determine which of the remaining 3 are most similar, and I will save part of those 2 for the sleeves. While I do not expect the sleeves to be identical, I would like them to be somewhat similar. It was interesting to see across the spin similarities and differences. In skeins 1, 3, and 4, I had the same approximate yards per gram at about 2.3. But skein number 2, and I remember saying it when I plied it, it felt like the plies were finer, and I did get more yards per gram at just over 2.4. So it's not a huge difference, but it was interesting that it was noticeable. Now, I have a little bit of bad news. After measuring all of the skeins after washing, I realized that I am about 20 grams short, or pardon me, 20 yards short of the yarn that is called for the sweater for my size. However, looking at the schematic, I think I can afford to shorten the sweater by about 1 inch, and that should hopefully provide me with enough yarn to complete it as otherwise as written. If not, I can make the sleeves a little bit shorter if I have to. I'm determined to make this work. I did check the Bramble Ridge website. They are out of this fiber in both lots. This was lot 1, and both lot 1 and lot 2 are sold out. And I don't think I would want a different dye lot anyway, because there was quite a difference between lot 1 and 2. So if I were even to try and get an extra braid dyed up as insurance, it would probably look different anyway. So I'm just going to make it work. I'll make it work. I think what had happened is I had based my fiber requirements on the spin that I had done for the yarn I used for this traveler cowl. It was the same yarn, and obviously I spun it just a little bit differently. I thought I was spinning it finer, and I must have spun it just a little bit thicker, because I based my yardage off of what I had gotten for that skein. In any case, the good news is that I did do a swatch last night. I had, after I applied all of my skeins, I had some yarn left on all 4, well, I had singles left on 4 of the bobbins, and so I did ply them together, and I ended up with 2 mini skeins. One was just over 4 grams, one was just shy of 5 grams. So I knit up this swatch, washed it and dried it, and I think my gauge is, well, I don't think my gauge is very close to what is called for with the called for needle, which is unusual for me. So I think I'll be good to go ahead with that needle, and I do plan to cast on this afternoon. Before I do that though, what I'm going to do is photograph all of these skeins, and then I'm going to go through them and just see which ones are most similar, which ones are a little different, and decide which one I am going to cast on with. So it's going to be a very exciting afternoon. As for my sock spin, so a couple of nights ago, I did some maintenance on my wheel, didn't take the whole wheel apart, but took different parts off, cleaned, oiled. My husband gave me a hand. We tightened up all the screws, and it's still pulling a little bit as I ply. So just from everything that I can find online, reading about it, I believe that I need to replace my drive band. It may be stretched because I just can't hold that tight tension on it. So I think it's stretched and needs replacing. So I am going to go ahead and order a new one. But in the meantime, I'm going to shift that spin over to my e-spinner now that it's empty. So I think what I will do is start with the traditional 3-ply, and then I will break the fiber on my traditional wheel, start from the other end of that braid, and then I'll just add in what I've already spun on my traditional wheel at the end, and then 3-ply it from there. So look for that in the coming days. So I think that's it for now. It's just about lunchtime, and then after lunch I'm going to get some photography done, and then I am casting on. It is late afternoon, or more accurately, early evening on Monday, July 27th. So Tour de Fleece 2026 is officially over as of last night. I came this close to recording at about 1:45 in my pajamas, no less, before I talked myself out of it and decided to wait until today to do a bit of a wrap up. I have not touched my sock spin since we chatted yesterday, but doing the 3-ply 2-way sock spin was always a secondary goal and not one that I realistically thought I could accomplish. So no problem there. The plus side is that I already have my fiber now prepped and ready to go when I'm ready to pick it up again, which I'm hoping to do this coming week. As for my primary goal, as you will have already seen, I am thrilled to have completed the goal of spinning a sweater's worth of yarn for the Tetris Pullover. And look what I have knit since we last chatted. This is part of the front of the pullover. So I have completed 2 sections of it. This is the first section, the stockinette section, and then once you're finished with that, you knit across, pick up along this side, and knit out, doing a garter stitch strip with a mitered corner. So I'm going to stand up and just show you where on the sweater this will sit. So this goes up to the armhole, and then this is the center front line. And there will be, once the body's done, you do a bit of a, you do a band of garter stitch around the bottom. So my next step here is to pick up, or not to pick up, but to continue knitting in stockinette stitch out this way for 7 inches. So this is probably the most accurate representation of the color. It is a dark, moody colorway, but when I bring it closer to the camera on my phone, it lightens up and you can get a better look at all the different colors that are present in this yarn. So I am loving how it's knitting up so far. The pattern calls for you just to begin with a skein and keep knitting, adding on as you go. But what I did is I began with my first skein, and then I worked this section in skein 4. So then I'm going to switch back again to skein 1 to do this next section of the bottom front, and then I will continue alternating between those two skeins for the rest of the front, and that way the color will be consistent on the front. And then I will most likely use 2 different skeins also for the back, and then the same skein for each sleeve, and hoping in that way just to maintain a good deal of color consistency. So that is the end of Tour de Fleece for me. I am very happy with my, what I could consider a successful journey, and I hope you've enjoyed coming along that journey with me. If you were participating in Tour de Fleece yourself, I hope you also had a good time and found some success with your goals. I am definitely looking forward to doing this again next year, and who knows, maybe I'll bring you along with me again then. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.